Thank you, Jackie. I love this journalism day. I think it's absolutely brilliant. It inspires me every time I come. I love meeting you all, and if you want to ask me questions afterwards or in this position now, please do. I'd really be interested to know what your views are and give you any advice if I can. The interview is, I suppose, one of the key things that you will learn on your way to being a hack, or if you already are a hack. I mean, the interview, it's one of those staples, isn't it, of a newspaper, a magazine, a broadcast, radio, television. It's either the column, which is your viewpoint, or the interview, which is hopefully the interview, a spotlight on the interviewer, but it is the interviewee, but it is also your viewpoint as well. But you've got to kind of mediate that and not let your viewpoint totally colour the interview. Otherwise it becomes like a sort of ego trip for you, the interviewer, and that is not the point of the interview. What is the point of an interview? Well, the whole thing about the interview, and many of you will already know this if you've got some experience of interviewing people like my esteemed colleague Matthew will know this very, very well, is that the interview is a game. The game is between you, the interviewer, and them, the interviewee, and you have both you want to get something out of the interviewer, which may be a deadly secret, which may be a piece of difficult politics, which might be something really awkward, which might be something they don't know about, which you want to bring out. And they have got something that they want to put over. On the most prosaic front, they want to sell their book. They want to promote their film. They want to push the whole city of culture. Or they want to promote themselves. Or they want to show that they've returned from some disastrous PR farrago 6 months ago, and they're back and it's all fantastic and it's all going well. So the game is, let them have a bit of their way and then have your way. But when do you have your way? Do you have it at first? Do you start off with the nightmarish question, when did you know your mother was an alcoholic, sort of thing? Or do you wait and let them have their way and then slip it in afterwards? The danger with that is that if they're, depending on who you're interviewing, they'll have people around them looking at their watches saying, oh no, you can't ask this question. And the thing about interviewing as a trainee journalist is you have to be absolutely brutal about it. You have to get into the mindset where you think, I am never going to see this person again. This person is not my friend. I am not a fan of this person, even if you are. So if you're interviewing someone who you've always loved, actually it's probably best to let your colleague do that, because if you're a massive fan, you are totally the wrong approach to being interviewed. You cannot approach anyone on bended knee to be an interview. You must interview them as an equal. You have to be polite. You have to do your homework. And this is what I've found being interviewed as chair of City of Culture. Because there are some things I don't want to talk about, which are in the public domain. And I can tell who's done their homework, because they always ask me about those things, because they've read about it not even on Wikipedia. They've just done a bit of digging. They found out about stuff. I'm 50 years old. I've been working as a journalist for 25 years. Obviously, there are things I've done and have been written about me, or I've said, or whatever I've done, that I'm sort of either don't want to talk about or I'm bored about talking about. So I never, ever will bring them up. And no, I'm not going to say what they are. But, if you're a good journalist, you'll have found them out. And so you'll ask me about them, and then I'll dismiss them or discuss them or whatever. But the fact is that, there is a certain Rosie Millard that I want to put over, and I make sure that is put over about me on the first page of if you tap in my name into Google. And that is all because obviously, as everyone does, as everyone you interview, unless they're living in a cave somewhere, will do, is they will look and see what their profile is like on Google or on Twitter or whatever, on social media. And they will want to promote that. And it's your job to find out other stuff about them, to ask them about other things. And not in a kind of rude way, but just, ask them those questions. Ask them questions that they're not expecting. And then you'll get you might get a fantastic answer. You might get a scoop. And you'll certainly get something different from everything else that's said about these people in the press. I mean, I have interviewed a lot of people. My area is culture, it's showbiz, it's entertainment, it's arts. People I interview are really used to being interviewed. They are so used to it. The more famous they are, the more used they are to doing it. And it is like they look at you and it's a carousel of people, particularly if you're at a press launch or some sort of press day where journalists are just put in front of these people, journalists after journalists, and they ask all the same question. It's your job to find out the different question and to pose them with that. And also to be polite and friendly and a bit flattering to them. This is where doing your homework really counts. Do not go and interview a writer and not have read their book. Just don't do it. Cancel the interview. If you haven't read their book, forget it. Do not go and interview someone who's directed a play without having seen the play, or at least with a working knowledge. I mean, okay, if you're interviewing Vikram Seth, as I once did, who wrote a book called A Suitable Boy, which was 900 pages long, and I had about 2 days' notice to interview him. I kind of made quite a decent fist of it. At least kind of like I got to know it and could talk intelligently about it. I hadn't read every last page, but at least I knew a bit about the book. If the interviewee likes you, that is a big help, as long as you're not a fan. But if you can kind of think, okay, around the subject a bit. So the other day I went to interview Guy Martin, who is a real star, and he's just really funny, and he's a really interesting person to interview. And if you ever have a chance to interview him, I urge you to go and do it. He lives in Lincolnshire. He lives just basically, he works in a truck factory, truck yard near Grimsby. And people may know him from Channel 4 because he's a sort of speed maniac on a motorbike. He looks a bit like a sort of rather unkempt Bradley Wiggins with sort of sideboards. And he's really, really funny. And he's doing a mad wall of death experience on Easter Monday. He's trying to break the speed record for going on the wall of death, which doesn't even have a speed record because it's such a mad pursuit. It's where you drive around a huge drum, you stick on it on a motorbike, and he's trying to do 100 miles an hour, and it's just madness, and he'll probably black out, but he's kind of okay about that. And I've interviewed him before, and we got on really well. But to interview him this time, I thought, and I was in Hull the night before, I thought, okay, you're from Grimsby. I thought, I'll go and see the film Grimsby and see if you like, because we might talk about it. He might find it totally offensive, and because it's sort of, I don't know if anyone's seen it here, but anyway. So I went to see it, and I just thought it was absolutely hilarious. I was on my own in the view. There were about 2 other people in Prince's Quay, and I was just sitting there giggling with laughter. I just thought it was really, really funny. Anyway, it was good because I interviewed him, and I said, what do you think of Grimsby? He said, I loved it, lass. He always calls me lass, which I just love. And it was very good because it was a sort of, it was very good because it was a sort of, it was, I don't know anything about motorbikes, really. I don't know anything about the Wall of Death. I mean, I did my research. I read up about it. I found out about it and so on, but I'm not an expert. But because I came at it in a sort of slightly different angle, he could relax a bit and not just to rattle out. I mean, because he's a sort of committed anti-media person, he wouldn't rattle out answers anyway because he's not that sort of person. But if you interview a politician or a very famous celebrity, they will have a stock number of answers that they will give you, and you can see them going into it. And if you've done your research and read all the cuttings on them, you'll think, okay, this is where they go into this story. And that is what you've got to avoid, because the trouble is, if you only get that in your copy, then that's all you're going to have to give in your piece, and then that's boring. And the other thing is, I would say, if there is a question if you really have got to ask this person, you just have to ask it, even if it's a really embarrassing question. I interviewed the the writer Wilbur Smith, and he's about 90, and he's married someone who's about 40 or 30. who loves him and he loves her. And I just had to ask him if he used Viagra. I just thought, the editor said to me, ask him if he uses Viagra. Now, that is quite a tough call. You know, you're interviewing Wilbur Smith. He wants to promote his latest book. You know, his wife is there. And I just thought, I'm never going to meet him again. And I just said, Wilbur, I have to ask you, do you use Viagra? I said, well, that's a question to ask a gentleman, Rosie. And he went off about it. And it was just very, very funny. And, you know, what's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to storm out of the interview. If someone storms out of an interview, that is gold dust for you. That is absolutely the one of the funniest interviews I ever read was, I think it's Janice Hadlow wrote about, oh gosh, what's his name? Can you remember, Matthew? The guy who was in Train Spotting, Ewan Bremner. Was Ewan Bremner? Yeah. Do you remember that interview? Oh my gosh. It was, if you haven't ever read it, I urge you to look it up. Just put in Ewan Bremner, Janice Turner, excuse me, into Google, because he is really grumpy. He does not want to be interviewed, and he's just rude and discourteous throughout. Well, that is just, you know, for a journalist, that is fantastic, because that is kind of stuff. That is your stuff. That is your stuff that you can use, and you can shine light on this person. And if it's to say, well, they're not a very nice person, that's okay. It happened. Don't make it up. I've spoken here before in this very arena about people making up stuff or people questioning you about things that they said they didn't say. Well, take a tape recorder. Take a tape recorder, record everything, write it all down, keep the tape until the piece has gone out, and if anyone questions you, you just say, I've got it all on my tape recorder. And do not make up quotes. That is just, you know, it's very, very tempting. Don't do it. And if something out of the ordinary happens, you know, again, write it down. I interviewed Terence Conran once, and he burst into tears. It was a bit alarming, but it was interesting. So I put it in the piece. If I'm being interviewed, obviously, as an interviewee, I will avoid all of that stuff. I will be really polite. I will only answer stock things. I will not burst into tears, and I will just give you, you know, the on-message thing about City of Culture. And it's your job to ask the difficult questions. And I know what those difficult questions are, but of course I'm not going to tell you. So, you know, some people find them out and some people don't. And that's your job, and that is one of the joys of being a journalist. That's about it, really. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I think I'm also being interviewed by someone later on, but if you want to just grab me at any other juncture today, I'll be floating around. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Does anyone really not like it? Oh, yes, there's a question here. I was I trained, after I went to Hull University, I went to the London College of Printing and trained as a journalist. And my very first thing, this is so long ago, because I'm so ancient, that I had a tape recorder with tape, you know, actual tape that you had to wind round, and I went out into London, and it was just terrifying. They said, go and find a story, and I started kind of crying in the loo. It was just awful. And then, you know, I trained as a reporter. And one of the things was to do an interview. And one of the things you do when you're a novice reporter, when you're a novice interviewee, is you talk all the time. Do not talk when you're interviewing someone. Listen, okay? Ask them one question and shut up and just listen. And, you know, if it's someone who's a bit tricky, they will trip over themselves in the interview if you're lucky. The person to listen to, if you're an interviewer or for anyone, and I listen to him all the time, and I think, God, is John Humphreys. John Humphreys on the Today programme. He is brilliant. He will do an interview, and his question will be 3 words long. How was it? Or 2 words. What happened? How did you feel? What are you going to do next? That is all John Humphreys says. Obviously, he's been briefed. Obviously, he's got huge amounts of background. He knows where he's going. Also, know where you're going in the interview, particularly if you're like John Humphreys in a position where you only have 5 minutes to interview someone. There is no point in wasting 4 minutes on pleasantries. Get to the point and keep your questions really brief and really listen to the answer. So I was about 23, I suppose, when I really started working. So it's good though. It's been good. It's a laugh, and it's a good career. And if you want to have a family, not everyone does. It's not essential, but if you do, Wi-Fi, fantastic. Smartphones, brilliant. You can actually kind of combine it with having children, traveling. It's a mobile thing, and you can do it. You can do it from here. You can do it from Manchester. You can do it wherever you are in the country. You can be on a national platform. You don't think just because you're in Hull, and it's a long way away from places, it doesn't matter. You can't have a voice, or you won't be heard, because you will be. You're on Wi-Fi. You've got email. Are there any other questions? Yeah, chap over here. Did I interview the film director? Yeah, I have interviewed film directors. Film directors are brilliant, actually, because they're used to bossing people around, and they're used to advocating their own viewpoint. They are much more interesting to interview than actors, I find, generally, because actors are great, but they speak other people's words. Film directors have a vision. They have a vision. I mean, I think that, unfortunately, if they're really in the public eye, they then get sort of asked political viewpoints, and not all of them really want to talk about political viewpoints. But I've interviewed lots of film directors, and it's good because, as I say, they are people who've had to have heroic amounts of drive and of focus and self-control to get where they are, and they want to talk about their films, and they're wonderful. I mean, Ken Loach, what a hero. Mike Lee. I mean, these are great, and also some American directors are fantastic. Yes. I think it's working. Just speak loudly. It's okay. Oh gosh, people are always asking me this. Highlight of my career, what, apart from chairing Hull City Culture and Challenge, apart from chairing Hull City Culture? I could answer both. Okay, in terms of journalism, the highlight of my career was actually standing on the mezzanine level of Tate Modern with my headphones on, speaking live on 5 Live as Tate Modern on its first day, because this is something I had covered. I was lucky enough to be the arts correspondent at the BBC from 1995 to about 2004, which was the time of the YBAs, Damien Hirst and Tracy Emin et al., but also the lottery. So, typically you would start off reporting on something wearing a hard hat, and then literally, so 3 years later, you'd be covering the opening event. And this was the case, with the Opera House, the British Museum, but more than anything else, it was the case with Tate Modern. And I'm old enough to remember a time when people said that contemporary art was rubbish, that the Tate bricks were an insult, that a child of 6 could do this, or a chimpanzee, or possibly both, and that the British public really did not like contemporary modern art. And suddenly, and I wrote a book about it, how the views of people changed, and how the warmth kind of came out, and suddenly people, forget the Dome, it was Tate Modern, which they were really excited about. And this was a museum which had the same collection that had been in Tate Britain for zillions of years. It wasn't even like it was a new collection. It was such an interesting phenomenon. It was like the transformation of something which hadn't in itself changed, but just because it was put in a new place, and that place had a special thing about it, that the work itself, the artwork itself, was seen as a different thing. It was a sort of alchemy, and it was so interesting because it happened alongside the Dome. And I was there at Tate Modern when the whole thing was just like, not exactly a hole in the ground because it existed before, but how, all the fundraising and all the anxieties about it. And I stood there on this morning in April, and I looked down, and the whole of the arts establishment was standing along in the Turbine Hall. There was everyone there, so Vivienne Westwood, Gilbert and George, every single director, every single curator, etc. And Nick Sirota, who I am a huge fan of, and who, as we all know, Tate is going to be up here at the Ferrens with the Turner Prize in November, which is just going to be brilliant in 17, not this year, 17. He just said, the Queen is going to be here in 20 minutes time, or 5 minutes time, to open this building. Thank you so much for your support. We'll be open to the public tomorrow. This gallery will be free for everyone. It is for everyone. Welcome. And honestly, the atmosphere was just amazing. It was just phenomenal. And you thought, this is a moment, the curtain's being raised on a really important cultural asset for the nation. And when my daughter, who is 18, kind of says, oh, I'm going to go meet my friends in Tate Modern, I just think, oh, that is just so brilliant. Because when I was 18, I loved the Tate when I was young, but I would never have said I'm going to go meet my friends at the Tate. And that, is a real switch. So that was the highlight of my career. It was just a real privilege to be able to cover it, and wonderful. And what was the biggest challenge? Well, I don't know. I mean, before you I suppose, I mean, this sounds a bit cheesy, but going out on that first day when I was at the LCP as a student, because I actually was crying in the loo, and I just thought, I can't do this. And I just thought, oh, come on, you've just got to do it. You've got to. And there is a bit of that in journalism. You just have to, whether it's finishing something, with a sort of nightmarish deadline, or just doing something you don't feel like doing because you've got to, because well, it's a deadline culture, and you have to rise to it. So that is the challenge, but it's worth it. Yes. Well, I think that I didn't think it. I thought that I didn't think it would be too hard, to be honest. I thought it would be interesting and fun, and I really look forward to doing it. Two things that helped me. Firstly, I absolutely love newspapers, and I always read a newspaper every single day. Even when I was at Hull, I had delivered. I bought a newspaper or got it delivered every single day, and I grew up reading papers. Now, again, many of you probably don't read newspapers, but let's just say the internet. Connect yourself with journalism every single day as a matter of course. Read the papers online, wherever, however you get them. So A, I knew the format, I knew the media, I felt at home with it. And B, I used role models. I mean, I really did use role models. Again, because I'm so ancient, the role models I used probably, might not mean much to you, but I used to, my first job was at This Morning, which used to be in the Albert Dock in Liverpool, presented by Rich and Judy. I was a researcher on This Morning. So I'd have a day, on any given day, you'd be dealing with models in hot pants, a child with a life-limiting disease, a massive celebrity, and a vicar, for example. And you'd have to deal with all that sort of stuff. And I'd come home and I'd start writing articles for The Independent, which was the first place I started writing for. And, I'm going to be writing a column on the last day it's in print, which is just terrible. I mean, I never thought I'd be saying that. But anyway, there we are. And I'd think, oh, my God, dare I say this? I'm 24 or whatever, and I don't know if I have the right to say it. And I used to think, would Julie Burchill say this? I think, yes, she would, and I'd just write it down. Or Janet Street Porter, one of these women who seemed very, very confident and always and authoritative and always had an opinion. I would worry that I didn't have the authority. And I thought, well, I must have the authority because I've pitched this idea and it's being commissioned. So someone thinks it's a good idea, the editor of the section. So frankly, if they think it's a good idea, I'm going to write it. And that is, you have to have that sort of confidence and just think, right, if I've been commissioned to do this piece, if the editor thinks it's a good piece, I will do what the editor wants. And that is the other thing about asking the question. My editor had said to me, ask Wilbur Smith if he takes Viagra. So there's no point in coming back saying, oh, I didn't want to because I was nervous or I was worried about being rude. If you ask it in a polite way, do you take Viagra? It's okay. It's a bit of an intimate question to ask, but it's not an illegal question to ask. And you'll have done as your editor says, and your editor's the one giving you the job, and he or she is your first port of call. So use role models and be confident, and also know your media. You know, understand your media, embed yourself in your media. If all you want to do is radio, listen to the radio all the time, because then you'll understand how it works. I mean, listen all the time, you know. Yes.
You obviously came to university and studied here. How do your memories of Hull then compare to the memories that you're helping to create for Hull now, and compare with your journalism career?
Well, the whole thing is very weird. I have one Hull where I was, 19 or 20, cycling around, living off Newland Avenue, and going to the university and being at the university. And then I have another Hull, which is now. And whenever I go up to the university, particularly, or go up into that area of Hull, the other memories do seep in, and I have to try and keep it separate because it is so different, and that is just really strange. But when I was at Hull, I just loved it. I mean, it was just great, and the course was great, and I had such a laugh, and it taught me so much. It changed me, and I was grateful for that. And so, throughout in my career, I've always championed Hull. The first article I ever wrote, because after I left Hull, I then trained as a reporter, and then I ended up at This Morning, as I said, in Liverpool, on one side of the country. And I thought, right, I want to start writing, and thinking of my role models. So, okay, they write, I'm going to try. And I looked at the M62, and it connected Hull to Liverpool. And I thought, well, I know about Hull, and I know about Liverpool because I'm living here, so I'm going to write a piece about the M62. So the very first article I ever wrote was about the M62, and I interviewed the bridge master of the Humber Bridge, and nosed around in the Humber Bridge and wrote a piece about the Humber Bridge. So I've been writing about Hull throughout my career and championing it, and it's not been difficult because it's such a great place. But very few people know about it. So actually, you're not championing something that everyone knows about. You're championing something which many people don't know about. And of course, the City of Culture year, we're going to be showing Hull off to the whole nation, and many people will experience Hull for the first time. That's a pleasure. Thank you so much for listening, and good luck with the course. Thank you.